Welcome back to the channel, everybody. We actually have a special guest out here in the shop today. I don't get many guests out here. It's usually just me, maybe the dog, but now we have a special guest who's going to be doing something very awesome on his faceting machine. This is Justin, and Justin is a faceter, and you have quite the, how to say this? You have quite the, what's the word am I looking for? You have just quite the operation going of being a teacher. You teach faceting, both in person and online. You have a YouTube channel. You're published. You've 2 books. Or wait, one book published twice.
Yeah, the 2nd edition just came out.
So this is the guy to talk to about faceting, not me. So let's chat about this. So Justin, you are on tour, which is extra cool. That's extra cool that you're driving around the country now, and you're both interviewing people that do faceting, and you're also you have a YouTube channel.
Yeah. So we're making a documentary about the history of American gem cutting, and meanwhile turning that adventure into a bunch of vlogs along the way, partially so we can remember what we're doing. But I have brought my faceting machine with me, which means we get to play a little bit today.
Yeah, I've never heard of anybody traveling with a faceting machine. And you're traveling, you're not like in a truck with a camper or a van, you're in a car.
A regular car. This fits right behind the passenger seat. So Victoria luckily has short legs and doesn't need to move all the way back, because if this is behind my seat, I cannot drive.
I think it's so impressive that you're traveling with this, and I like that you have a very streamlined kit.
Yeah, I kind of figured out what was the minimal amount of stuff that I needed. Of course, I need a couple different laps because I can't do the whole cutting and polishing process without a few things, but pretty much everything here is just stuff that I need, and it all fits into one small box when it's all packed up.
That's so impressive.
So this thing, a box, and the power adapter, and that's the whole kit. So it's kind of fun.
It's very simple, and I mean, I know very, very little about faceting, but the first thing when I started watching your videos that I noticed is that your machine that you are currently using is very unique. It's not the traditional kind of massed machine. You're using a handpiece.
Using a handpiece. So I started on a mass machine. I started with sort of the typical American style, but eventually I switched over to this while I was living in Thailand, and I kind of just fell in love with it. I used to use a polymetric, like a regular American mass machine. Once I started to use this, we did this just so we could start doing the school that we had out there. But once I started to use it after a couple of months, I was kind of like, ooh, I think I like this one better. It's kind of like if I grew up as a Mac guy, and then if you get a PC, you're kind of like, ooh, I kind of like it better. I feel like I cheated a little bit, but it's part of me now. This thing is like part of my hand now.
So they still share a lot of similarities in that you have laps.
You have laps.
You have laps.
Pretty much everything is the same. I mean, there's 3 things you need for faceting: angles, rotation, and height control, to be able to really control what you're doing. And I have all those. I've got rotation, I've got angles, and then the height controls on the machine. But so this thing goes up and down and changes the height so I can make facets bigger or smaller. That's it. From
the perspective of the lay person like myself, it seems significantly more simple. Am I wrong? Is that a mischaracterization of it?
I think as a teacher, I would say it's way more simple for me to teach with this one. It's very intuitive, because if you want to go forward, you go forward. If you want to tilt backwards, you tilt backwards. And what I found in the students is it just, you understand it. In the same way that if someone says, draw a circle, you don't have to think about how to do that. You just do it. And
very true.
This being in your hand, it sort of just, it's like that too. It's like just an extension of your arm, and you just move it around once you get the hang of it. Usually it takes a couple stones, and then you got it. So it's easy.
So it's still very similar in that you have a little cup of water. You have your laps.
Yeah, the laps are going to go in here.
So you're traveling with 3 laps.
Yeah.
This
is my streamlined kit.
I was surprised when you broke out the 3 and you're not like, you don't have any other ones.
Well, I have some secret weapons in here, that's why. So these 2 laps are my cutting laps. So that's a 100 grit preforming and a 600 grit cutting. So that's kind of normal. I mean, everybody has a rough one and a finer one, I guess. But then the secret weapon is this one. And so what this is it's pewter. So it's lead
Really?
and tin,
Okay.
which is not a very common kind of lap to get today. I actually had it custom made. It's made by Gearloose. It's a one-off that he made in his garage because they can't have lead in the Gearloose factory. So he made this special for me. And I knew about this based on master cutters that I got to learn under in England. And I played with this earlier this year when we hadn't started the trip yet and realized that this thing can polish pretty much everything quickly without scratches, which makes it like a magic weapon against stones.
One thing that I've noticed about faceting in general, and specifically mostly because I'm watching your content, is how little physical equipment you really need to get into faceting. And I know that's a total hang up for a lot of people when it comes to lapidary. Is how do you do lapidary with a 6-wheel cab machine and slaps on.
I mean, we can see in here that you have a lot more stuff.
There's a lot of things in here, right?
And I usually fit all this onto a coffee table,
which is a very interesting perspective on working with stones. I know lapidary in the traditional sense and gem cutting are not the same thing. But they're adjacent.
Yeah, they're in the same family. Yeah. I started as a cabber.
Okay.
So for 2 years before I learned faceting, I was just cabbing, slabbing, sawing, learning the basics of how polishing works. But I always wanted to do this. And even when I first started, I was just in my bedroom. I was in San Francisco, small bedroom. Here's my bed, here's my closet, and here's a little desk that has this thing on it. And even now, as we're traveling, we've been, I've set this up in some pretty small spaces. We were in Vancouver for 6 weeks teaching, and I had this just in a very tiny corner of the bedroom because that's what we had. And I was like, well, I want to be able to facet stones at night after we're teaching. And yeah, you can literally fit it into a space this big.
And it's quiet. It's
quiet. It's not really messy. The only time that it ever gets messy, when you're doing your girdle, so your outline shape, you have to take this thing off, which means that there's going to be some water spraying. But
that's not bad.
It's not that bad. It makes just a little line, and if you just put some saran wrap on the wall, if you know that you're renting or whatever, that's it. Or a curtain or whatever.
I've opened up my oil slab saw while it was running and just rooster-tailed oil.
Not good. I mean, even a regular cabbing machine, if you don't have some guard on it, it's going to spray everywhere. Where this thing, it's spraying inside the box, basically, other than this one part. So that's the only messy spot.
So you're teaching people how to facet. And what does that actually look like? Is it a week and you can kind of have an understanding as to what you're doing on a machine?
No, it's 2 weeks. So we have basically come up with a plan where you can come in, we provide everything, including the stones, and then over the course of 2 weeks, you're going to cut 3 stones from rough and then learn how to do recutting, which is really, really cool because that enables you to do a lot of trade work, for jewelers and stuff. But usually, our goal is once you've done 4 stones, and it's not just any 4 stones, it's a curriculum that we put together, but the skills that you develop by doing those 4 stones means when you go home, you've already made all the mistakes that you need to make. We've already shown you all the gear that you need to work, at least in the way that we work professionally, and you don't need anything else. We've given you enough where you can figure out the rest. And then if you need to ask a random question or something, you can email, but almost no one ever does.
So side note a little bit, I've talked to somebody that has taken faceting classes and they told me that they wish they had done it sooner than later because they were already owned a machine for I think 2 years and they were just kind of figuring it out and buying some books and they're took a class, I think it was a 1 week class and they're worth it. Absolutely worth it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, for me personally, when I learned through the Lapidary Club system, which is slow. It takes a while. You're using cobbled together machines sometimes, and then you are sort of, getting information from books and the internet, and none of it really works together and makes a lot of sense. And you have to figure out your own way. It took me several years to figure out just what I was doing, and for someone to come in for 2 weeks and then leave pretty much ready to go. Not necessarily ready to professionally start selling, but within 6 months of practice time at home, you could be professionally selling. And the stones that you cut in class are good enough that you could go throw them up on your Etsy or whatever you have, Instagram, if you wanted to. You shouldn't. You should keep the early stones. Those are good souvenirs.
Can we talk about money for a second?
Yeah.
Because faceting machines really
Expensive.
run the spectrum of, definitely there's like really cheap stuff out there that you would find on like Alibaba, eBay,
Amazon,
and then all the way up to like $8,000 ish, and everything in between, it seems like.
Well, everything that's above a very kind of high entry level. That was one of the reasons why we originally decided to use this machine when we opened our original school in Thailand. We knew that whatever machine that you learn on, you're going to want to buy that machine. So if I teach you on an $8,000 machine, even I have struggled to justify buying an $8,000 machine. So this whole package here, this comes from Sri Lanka. This kit we sell, but you could make it yourself if you wanted to. Total amount that you need to really get going with laps and everything is about $3,000, $3,500, depending on if you need furniture and stuff.
And for just kind of some comparison, you can easily spend $2,500 on a cab machine.
Yeah.
You can spend another $2,000 on a slab saw, pretty simply, and then a trim saw.
Yeah.
And just it really does snowball over time. Do you have a thought at all on used faceting machines? Are they to be avoided because you don't know like how they've been treated?
Well, here's the thing about used faceting machines. They're always going to be beat up, but that's not always a bad thing. My first 3 faceting machines were from the 80s and 90s. So while you're learning how to facet, that isn't very good, because if it is all beat up and messed up, you can never tell if you're making a mistake or the machine is. But if you're clever, you'll start to learn how to fix it, and then you understand how faceting machines work. Because really, this is a really simple machine. And I always kind of tell people, if you can understand how a bike is put together, which some people can't, but it's a pretty simple machine. The faceting machine is not any more complicated than a bike. Like, there's no inside. It's, you know what I mean? Yeah. It's all out here. If you can just understand how screws and gears and whatever work, and all the faceting machines are pretty much like that.
So with the Sterling machine and the handpiece, that raises your table? Is that what you...
The plate, yeah. The plate. This just raises up the handpiece. So this is just one of our controls. So whereas on a mass machine, the head goes up and down. You would turn it up here and it would raise the whole head up and down.
And it's definitely a more sweeping motion with a mass machine. You see people sweeping across the...
Well, we still sweep. In polishing, mostly we sweep. In cutting, I mostly just keep it steady. But you could sweep, but it's not really necessary for... I don't know if it's because the laps are smaller or what, but I never had a problem with I just cut. But in polishing, you have to sweep. That's part of getting the scratches out. And, there's all kinds of physical things happening during polishing that you have to learn. That's one of the things that we teach. Learning how to get the scratches out, that's half of the whole thing. So if you don't learn that from the person that teaches you, you haven't really learned that much. And we try to, we don't want to kill people with giving them tough stones, because you want to feel good and like finish what you start. But we have to give them some challenging stones, because if they don't learn how to do that, they're going to be lost when they get home. So, yeah.
I want to talk about your book for a second, right? I know, unfortunately, you don't have a copy with you.
We sold them all.
We sold them all.
The second edition. So we put out a book last year, The Secret Teachings of Gem Cutting. So what this book is basically, it's not how to cut a stone. I don't think learning how to cut a stone from a book is the easiest way. So I haven't tried that. For this book, it's about what are the classic designs. It's a design book, essentially. What are all the shapes and designs that jewelers actually use, the real gem trade actually uses? Not like all the crazy competition ones that are fun but not practical. These are like the quote-unquote real ones. So since we've been traveling around for all these years, meeting cutters and jewelers and looking at the history, I was able to sort of compile this list of cuts. And so last year we put out a book with all the designs, with a deep version and a short version, so you can have different stones. And also there's like an intro section that's kind of like gemology for gem cutters.
Okay.
Yeah. So second edition is just coming now. So I think like in a couple of weeks we're going to pick them up in Seattle.
I think we're going to have to talk off camera about this book publishing thing, because that's a topic that we've been talking a lot about here on the channel, about, rockhounding, mineralogy, and some of the pitfalls of some of the published books out there. It's certainly, I think, both complex to publish, and there's a lot of, there's more bad books out there than what I may have thought years ago.
Yeah. For me, I'm a book lover and a book collector, so I've tried to get every Faceting book I can find. But that becomes fun because then you start to look at how different they all are, and especially when you go back into like the 30s and 40s, it's so different than what people were saying in the 70s and 80s, and then that becomes so different than what people were saying in the early 2000s, and now we're like in the era of YouTube videos where people maybe aren't reading those books, but they're learning from somebody on YouTube, and that might disagree with all the books. So yeah, books are fun, but for Faceting, I think they can be tricky because some of the classic ones, like the Vargas, which is what almost every faceter I've ever met has those books. They're very old, and I would say they're antiquated at this point.
But I have a lot of old books, and it's still nice to have that like piece of history and have like the perspective of what people were doing 30, 50, 100 years ago.
I've gleaned so much insight from looking back, especially at the first generation, 20s and 30s. Those guys were inventing everything from scratch. There weren't books at that time to tell them how to do it. And so I love kind of going back and seeing what they were doing, because they were really inventing something new. I mean, new for America at least. And some of the stuff that they come up with, it's really clever and smart, and we've forgotten it now. We've sort of gone in some other way. And if you look back to what they were doing in the beginning, it's like sometimes a foreign world. It looks like another world because it's so far removed from like having a digital ultra tech. With all this crazy stuff, it's like it's raw.
Well, let's grab some water and fire this thing up.
Okay. So aside from just traveling with the Faceting gear, we've also been traveling with baby Milo, who is our gemstone apprentice. She's now been to more gemstone mines than almost anyone else that I've ever met. So
very adorable.
Yes. Okay, that's all you need, Milo. Okay, so we're setting up. We're checking out the machine.
So first off, this machine does not have a US plug.
Correct. It comes with this little voltage converter.
Okay.
So that comes with the machine, and it doesn't even cost extra, which I was really impressed by. This is the first time this year that I've used this in America, so I wasn't totally sure what to expect. But no, it just comes with that thing. You plug it into the wall. It runs normally.
Nice.
So I've got my lap on here. So I've got a power switch over on this side, which turns the machine on. And then there's also this knob here, which controls my speed. And so this is my RPMs. So this is super handy. Not very many machines actually show you what your RPMs are, but this actually becomes pretty cool and fascinating because sometimes for certain stones you automatically know you're going to slow down. Maybe for quartz you're going to go down to 300 because you need a slower speed for the polishing. So you can always just know where you're at and keep track of the actual RPMs. For me though, usually I'm staying somewhere around 900 for cutting and polishing. So I got my lap on here. I don't have a stone right now, but let's just say I did. The stone would go on the dop. The dop goes into the handpiece, and then that's my stone on the wax, hypothetically. And so then it's just a matter of, going to the index that you want. And this seems very complicated when you look at it, and it looks like a lot of numbers, but it's actually very, very simple. It's just a way of dividing up the circle into parts, like a pie slice. So I pretty much have most of my designs memorized. So now if I want to cut a round brilliant or an emerald cut or whatever, I know, I don't have to look at any diagrams or anything.
And there's almost like an endless number of plans to
pretty
follow.
much. I think the main website where you can download diagrams has something like 6,000 different designs.
That's a lot.
Though a lot of them are just iterations, and I think really there's only probably a finite number of actual usable good designs. I mean, our book had 50. There's probably a couple hundred more that are really useful that aren't in there, but you could come up with anything. And so then the design will tell you how to cut it. So using these numbers to rotate the stone, and then different tiers will have different angles. So for instance, on the round brilliant, you got 3 tiers. So one tier maybe is going to be at 35. That's the main facets. and then you'll tilt slightly up to 20 to get the star facets, and then you'll tilt down a little bit to maybe 40 to get your brake facets. So you can control all that with this. And so you set your angle, you set your index, you set your height, and you've got to have some water dripping here so that you don't get dust or get the stone too hot. So once your water drip's coming down, keeps your laps wet, keeps your stone wet, and then you just come down with this thing and you cut a little bit, and I can cut a little bit of wax.
Yeah, that's all right. We get
that little flat spot, if you can see it. So
I think, yeah, I mean, I get. Well, first off, I'm surprised at how quiet the machine is. Do you know anything about the motor that's in there?
It's a German motor with I think the speed controller comes from Finland for whatever reason, but it's pretty quiet. The only thing that it makes a little bit of running noise, and then you can hear there's that high pitched noise, which is the speed controller.
Yeah.
And as I turn it up and turn it down, but most of the time I'm listening to like an audiobook while I'm cutting, so I'm not really too worried. And it's not something that's like bug your neighbors or anything, but yeah, it's not really much.
So what you guys don't usually see here on the channel is that we're in my backyard and I have a 2-story house. When I run my slab saw, I can feel it on the second floor.
And I'm sure you must have to wear ear protection when you're in here, right? Because it's quite loud.
I mean, you're supposed to.
I mean, if you're in here all day.
if you care about your hearing, you do.
Yeah, for me, I do. So, but this thing is.
Yeah, so this is impressive. Yeah. Just the.
And then all the water then comes out into a bucket, or
Easy.
For travel, I've just been using like a 2-gallon water bucket. We drink the water, keep the bucket or keep the jar, and then that's a very portable water container.
I love the simplicity of this. Having a background in like machining and fabricating and stuff, seeing some of the mast units, they are precision machines, like not.
And they're heavy.
Yes.
My old mast machine is the polymetric. It must be one of the heaviest ones. It's all brass. It's got like a steel base. It is monstrously heavy. And if you really wanted to travel with it, I've traveled with it before. It's kind of delicate. Like I'm a little bit worried to take some of the mast machines like in a suitcase. Whereas this one, I actually went to Sri Lanka and picked it up and brought it back in a suitcase.
It's all casted.
Yeah, it's all cast. It's not super light either. You can carry it, but it's. I've taken it through customs though, and on the airplane, so it's not impossible. Wrap it up in some bubble wrap, and it just barely fits into a check-in bag, which is kind of interesting for international fun. And so then all the other stuff that I need is like all over here. It fits in the plastic box, but
that's very cool. I was impressed when I was watching you unload your vehicle. I was expecting more.
No, it's literally just this.
That's pretty sweet.
And so then the rest of the stuff over here is mainly just accessories.
Not that. That's my stuff.
Yeah, that's your stuff. But this is basically a station for dopping, and I carry the wooden cutting board around just so I can stay clean, because if we're in a hotel or something and you start getting hot wax on stuff, you're going to get in trouble.
Why the red wax and not green, brown? Do you have
This mostly it's convenience. This is a medium heat wax, so this is the one that we can get in Thailand, and I know that it works, so I just keep on using it. But I've used brown. It's good. The black one, well, I don't know, it depends on the manufacturer, but sometimes if they're too soft, they get runny, and if they're too high heat, then they're good. But for the students, it's not good. It's not good. So when we're teaching them how to do the wax stopping, we're teaching them how to use the torch, how to use the wax, how to get everything done. So that's one of the really important skills that we're teaching. But also in my traveling bit, that's really important, because I need to be able to, grab a piece of rough and not think about, I have to glue it on here. I need a special target. I need to wait overnight and blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay, 5 minutes, it stopped. I'm ready to go. Usually I can, between the starting of the dopping to the pulling the final stone out of the acetone, that's for me about 2 to 3 hours.
So from the lapidary end, I've kind of given up on waxes, and I've just been using like glues.
Really?
Yes.
Oh,
now I know it's very two different beasts, like lapidary and the faceting, but I've kind of given up on waxes, mostly because I have to keep transporting them back and forth between my shop, which is unheated in the wintertime, because they will pop right off.
Yeah,
because it'll be like 0 out here.
When I was learning wax stopping, it was the winter time in Scotland, and we didn't have central heating. It was like a fireplace, and I couldn't learn it because, same reason. It was too cold. The air was too cold. I think now I wouldn't have a problem because I know how to do it. But learning how to wax stop is hard. But you've got that wax heater thing.
Yes, one of these things.
For cabbing, I use that. I used to use that exact same thing all the time, but I don't know. I never did it. I never did it in a place like this.
You should come up here when it's the tundra.
Yeah, no. So then the only other stuff I have, so I do have some glue. This is the glue that we use to do the transfer. So the second side I'll do with glue. I've got a small selection of DOPs. This is the acetone just to clean the stone from the glue and from the wax. This thing is handy. It just holds the DOP so I don't burn my fingers while I'm doing my heating.
And you don't have one of the transfer jigs.
I don't use one. So it's not necessarily with this machine, but with my technique that I've learned, I cut crown first, which is not typical for American cutters. But with crown first, meaning you've got the whole crown and table cut and polished, when you go to transfer, we just take the stone, we put a little glue on here, which is why I've got all this glue on top. I just dip this in the glue, and then I take my stone and I just literally put the table right on there, and I come down here by eye and I center it and I turn it and I center it, and then within 30 seconds it's transferred. I wait 5 minutes for the glue to dry, and I'm ready to go onto the second side. So that
seems a lot easier.
Yeah, I think it is. And a lot of people see me doing that and they're like, well, there's so many chances to mess it up. Why would you even mess with it? But the thing about all of this kind of, using the wax instead of the glue, using the transfer like that, even using the handpiece, it's not about the fact that the machine is so perfect and so precise and it has all these tools that are helping you. It's more actually the fact that the machine is not perfect and the transfer is not perfect and the wax is not always perfect, and you have to compensate with your skill. And it sounds a little bit funny when you have this grand American-made machine that's $7,000 or whatever, and it can perfectly do everything. But as soon as that machine is not perfect anymore, meaning you've already cut 100 stones on it and it's all beat up at that point, if you don't know how to compensate for the machine, you're dead. And for me, the machine I know was never perfect from the start. I'm the one that has to do that, and that's how we teach it. We tell them on the first day, this is not a perfect machine, and it's been used. It's in class. You're still going to be able to cut a great stone. We're going to teach you how. And for me, in my practice, I know how. So I don't care if the lap's not perfectly flat. I don't care if the handpiece is a little bit off, or whatever the million things that happen during faceting. Understanding how to compensate for it with your skill and your experience is really where it's at.
You're certainly selling me on this more than what I thought. Like, when's your Washington class, Oregon class?
Yeah, next summer we'll be back, so you can come and join us.
I would be very curious to at the least sit in as like a casual sideline observer.
Come.
Maybe for day one.
You can come do a stone or something like that.
And just check it out and see the
thing about it, and I felt the same way with cabbing too, it's a meditative practice, right? Like when I sit here, whether it's for 2 hours to finish a stone real fast or for a full day 6-hour period, like this has become like my sort of stress relief. This is when I get into my zone and I get quiet and I'm focused and my mind is clear and I'm just looking at these geometrical patterns and thinking about how am I going to bring the best out of this stone. And if I don't, now that I'm in the habit of doing that, if I don't do that all the time, I'm kind of a grumpy dude. Like I need gym cutting at this point. It's part of like my whole life experience. So the fact that I get to do it professionally and then sell the stones that I make, it's really cool. But even if you don't do it professionally, I mean, whether it be cabbing or faceting or slabbing or whatever, working with those natural materials, being creative, and then actually getting that moment to just hopefully be with yourself, with your thoughts, and just like be clear for a minute. It's not easy to do that these days. But I find that for me, this is like my moment to actually sit and be still.
I have talked with a massive amount of people, and it seems like people that do faceting make a lot more money selling faceted stones than just your, I don't know, 30 by 40 cabochon. Like, does the world need more 30 by 40 cabochons? I feel like it does. I feel like it don't. So that's just my take. Your mileage will probably vary there somewhat, but
yeah, we don't do a lot of caps. I think for that reason, I don't know. You know, with certain materials, maybe opals, the kind of materials that you wouldn't facet, like jade and stuff like that. But stars, yeah.
Head over to Etsy and just see how many cabochons are sitting over there on Etsy versus how many end up selling.
Yeah, well, you can find a lot of bad faceted stones on eBay too, though. So
I'm sure. Maybe I'm way off here. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Well, yeah. No.
I really appreciate you coming by the shop, bringing your machine. That's very awesome to see. I have a much better understanding now personally about faceting, where I've watched your content, I've watched other people's content. I kind of had a baseline, you know? I mean, going to my rock club, there's a faceting room, and I've poked my nose in, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's not as intimidating as it looks. You know, when people first see faceting, they're like, oh, designs, numbers, they think it's math, and it's really, there's almost no math involved. I mean, it's slightly more complicated than cabbing because you can't just do whatever you want, but it's really pretty simple, and it's pretty rewarding because the kind of stones that you can get out of faceting will be of a totally different variety and caliber. I mean, cabs have their place. They're wonderful for those types of materials, but if you're working with a clear, transparent crystal, the faceting is really what's going to make it alive and, you know, dance.
Speaking of stuff like that, you've also gotten some of your own material. You were just out in Montana.
That's true.
Sapphires.
Yeah, Montana sapphires. We got stones in Utah. We've gotten pretty much stones everywhere.
You're traveling all around.
Yeah. If you want to see the full experience of what it looks like to cut the stone, I have a bunch of long YouTube videos, you know, 2-3 hour videos where you can actually sit and watch me do the whole thing. I've also got similar videos condensed into 5 minutes on my YouTube channel. So,
and your YouTube channel is just your name.
My name, Justin K. Prim. You'll find it.
I'm going to drop links down below to his channel, Instagram, and your website.
Yeah.
And people can also, your book is it available now or no?
You can order it now. The pre-order is going to get fulfilled in a couple of weeks. So magisgems.com is where you can get it. That has stones, but also books and tools. This toolkit is available there.
Very cool.
And yeah, if you guys are going to be out in Tucson this coming year, are you going to be out in Tucson?
I should probably go to Tucson.
Okay, well, I'm going to be there. She's going to be there. We're going to be having a fasting party there. So come join us.
What about Milo?
Milo?
No Milo?
Dogs in Tucson.
In the winter, though?
Well, it's too busy for a dog.
That's true. That's true.
She won't know where to go.
Thank you so much for coming by the shop, showing me your machine, all of that. It's been fantastic.
It's been my pleasure.
I appreciate it so much. And yeah, I think we'll leave this one here, and we'll catch you guys on the next video.
Catch you later.